We've covered the temperature and precipitation signals separately, but the question everyone actually wants answered is simpler. What does this winter actually look like where you live? Let's break it down region by region using NOAA's newest seasonal outlook. Before diving region by region, it's worth setting expectations for how to use this kind of breakdown. Think of it less as a prediction for any specific storm and more as a guide to which way the dice are loaded for your area this winter. Every region below still has some chance of experiencing weather that runs opposite to its overall lean. That's simply the nature of a probabilistic seasonal outlook rather than a flaw in this particular forecast. Starting in the Pacific Northwest and Northern Rockies, this looks like one of the more mild, dry winters this region has seen in a while. The strongest warm signal in the entire outlook sits right over this area, and it comes paired with the quieter storm track as the polar jet stays bottled up farther north into Canada for much of the season. That means fewer of the fast-moving clipper systems that have delivered frequent light to moderate snow to this region in recent winters. If you live in Seattle, Portland, or across the interior Northwest, plan for a winter that leans noticeably milder and drier than what's become typical, more North Pacific-influenced air than the Arctic conditions this region sometimes deals with. Moving into the northern plains and upper Midwest, the story is broadly similar, mild and comparatively storm-starved by this region's normal standards, though there's a wrinkle worth mentioning. Even with a strong El Niño favoring overall warmth here, the polar vortex remains a wild card. Forecasters aren't ready to write off entirely. It's overperformed in some recent winters, and there's still a reasonable chance it delivers at least brief, sharp intrusions of Arctic air into this region, even during an otherwise mild season. The difference this year is that those intrusions, if they happen, are more likely to be shorter-lived and less frequent than in a typical or La Niña winter, rather than absent entirely. By the way, if you'd like specific weather forecasts for your region or city, please leave them in the comments. I'll answer them individually as time allows. Also, if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel, you'd be very grateful. Now, let's move on. Now let's head to the region with the most dramatic shift from recent winters, California and the Southwest. Above normal precipitation is favored here, with the heaviest signal in this entire outlook concentrated specifically over coastal California. Combined with the storm track mechanics we've covered, expect a winter defined by a repeated parade of Pacific storm systems, sometimes called atmospheric rivers, bringing meaningful rain to areas that spend much of the year quite dry. The mountains benefit even more directly. The Sierra Nevada sits positioned for a well above average snowfall season, the kind of pattern that shows up in the vast majority of moderate to strong El Niño winters. The Southern Rockies, including mountainous areas of Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, are looking at a similarly active snow season, a sharp contrast to the northern half of the Rockies, which falls under the quieter, milder pattern affecting the rest of the northern tier. Just east of the Rockies, across the central and southern plains, expect an active enough pattern that the areas immediately downstream of these systems, portions of eastern Colorado and neighboring sections of the plains, could see a fairly snowy season in their own right as storm systems track through repeatedly. It's worth pausing on Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri specifically, since this stretch sits right at the boundary between the milder, quieter northern pattern and the more variable Ohio Valley and Midwest setup farther east. Expect this corridor to lean toward an overall milder, somewhat drier winter than average, without the same degree of roller coaster back and forth expected farther east. Though it won't be entirely immune to the occasional colder intrusion given how unsettled the broader pattern is shaping up to be. For the Deep South, stretching from Texas and New Mexico through the Gulf Coast states and into Georgia and Florida, this is genuinely one of the more complicated forecasts in the entire outlook, and it deserves real attention rather than a quick mention. This region sits in what's often called a winter battle zone, where storm systems frequently produce a fight between rain, snow, and ice rather than settling cleanly into one category. Given the active southern-focused storm track this El Niño is expected to deliver, expect above-average storminess through this corridor overall, including an elevated risk of severe weather at times. a pattern that shows up more often than not during strong El Niño winters. With that much active weather moving through, don't rule out the possibility of at least one of those rare snow events for parts of the Deep South this year. Though given how infrequent snow is in this region under any conditions, that remains a modest possibility rather than an expectation. For the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and parts of the Great Lakes, expect a genuine roller coaster rather than a clean seasonal trend in either direction. Mild Pacific air will push into this region regularly given the broader pattern, but equally frequent Arctic blasts diving down from Canada are expected to punctuate that mildness throughout the season. There's a specific wild card worth flagging here too. The Great Lakes are running unusually warm this year, and if colder air arrives over those warm lake waters, particularly earlier in the season during November and December, that combination can produce significant lake effect snowfall, potentially more intense than typical, given just how much warmer the lake water is than usual heading into winter. Heading further east into the Appalachian Mountain Range and interior eastern areas, expect the potential for some genuinely large snowstorms this season. This region benefited from several notable snow events last winter, and with a more active nor'easter storm track expected this year, forecasters see this area positioned to consistently cash in on some significant snow systems again. Finally, for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, the nor'easter storm track is the dominant factor to watch all winter. Expect the potential for multiple strong nor'easters through the season, and whether any individual system arrives as a major snowstorm or more of a rain and wind event will depend heavily on exact storm track and timing, details that won't sharpen until much closer to each event. Coastal areas along the eastern seaboard should plan for the possibility of multiple shots at significant snowfall over the course of the winter, based on the combination of the temperature outlook and the expected nor'easter frequency in this region. It's worth closing with an honest reminder about how far out all of this still is. This is a preliminary 3.5-month out outlook built from historical El Niño relationships, current model guidance, and the strength of this particular event. Confidence in the broad regional patterns, warmer and drier north, active and stormy south, is genuinely solid given how strong this El Niño is shaping up to be. Confidence in exactly which week any individual storm arrives, or precisely how much snow falls in any specific city, remains low this far out, and that's normal for a seasonal outlook rather than a weakness in the forecast itself. If there's one thing worth remembering across every region covered here, it's that a seasonal outlook describes the odds tilted in one direction over 3 months, not a guaranteed script for how every individual week plays out. A milder leaning northern tier can still deliver a sharp cold snap. An active southern storm track won't produce a major system every single week. Use this outlook the way it's intended, as a genuine, well-supported guide for what to generally expect and plan around this winter, while still watching the shorter range forecasts as we get closer to any specific stretch of days that actually matters for your plans. Expect these regional pictures to sharpen considerably as NOAA releases updated outlooks through the fall and as we get closer to the heart of winter itself.